13. But for some boys, it's late. And one of the things we found in that survey that I did for the book was how much teasing boys get if they go into puberty and their body starts getting really long and gangly at 12, and the ones who go in late. So isn't that an interesting thing that they were saying how really awful it is when people boys tease them about that? So essentially, this window, it's a lot longer today. So I'm sorry those parents who thought 18's done. In actual fact, 18 to 22 is recognised as a high-risk window because often they're leaving home. But we now know from the neuroscience that boys' prefrontal cortex, which is this executive brain which makes them make great decisions, isn't fully developed till the mid-20s. And for some, for a whole lot of reasons, it's even later than that. So this is technically the transition from turning a little boy into a man. Woo, the bridge.
Wow. What a transition too. I did actually hear that, people, boys particularly, think they're invincible, that nothing bad can happen to them until their brain fully develops. In fact, there's been situations where, someone, unfortunately, their friend has unfortunately died in a car accident, and then after the funeral, they've gone and done a whole bunch of burnouts. And that's because they don't actually compute to say, actually, this could actually happen to me.
And that's a really, really good thing to bring up, because one of the key frustrations as a teacher and a counsellor was for parents was saying, look, he's just done the same stupid thing again at school. Like, he's been at the office 5 days in a row. Like, why can't he just, and that's one of those things that we there's a combination of things going on for the boy that's a little different to the girl, and that the testosterone and the vasopressin, which are these, neurotransmitters in the brain, plus the fact that they're biologically wired to step up and be risk takers, that's still in the psyche. And on top of that, GABA disappears. Now, GABA is this wonderful thing, which I can't pronounce very good, and it's amino acid. And it's like an inhibitor that is in our brain until puberty starts, and it kicks back in, somewhere in the 20s. So again, that's why they're so much more at risk of hurting themselves. I'm a mum of 4, and there were trips to the emergency department that you wouldn't believe what caused it, because they were quite intelligent boys, because, again, they're not thinking. And when we go, why weren't you thinking? I told you last week, you actually need myelin in the brain, which is a fatty white substance that is gradually growing. So, again, a lot of boys get shamed because they make these poor choices. And they really have no idea why they did it. And so often there's no intention underneath it to hurt themselves or anyone else or the world around them. And we really need to keep that in our mind if we're raising them.
Yeah, fantastic. So you've mentioned something really important there, because the reality is that like, I've got a teenager, and I've also got a tweenager, and I've also got nearly a tweenager. And my teenage boy, sometimes it's actually quite difficult to communicate, and some grunts and things like that come out. Now, my question to you is, what's the best way to communicate to tween and teenage boys, and actually, how do we get them to listen to us?
All right, so I'm going to go back one step, because this is a really key to the grumpy, and so many mums have emailed me saying an alien stolen my beautiful boy. Will he ever come back? And that is the combination of the hormone changes, the physical changes, the brain changes, the emotional brain changes, all collide together quite quickly. But the brain pruning is the trickiest bit, because what happens to that is it prunes off a little bit too much. So for a boy who was quite capable of making his lunch or putting his lunchbox in his bag and remembering to get on the bus, will suddenly get more forgetful. So when he feels forgetful, he feels a bit silly, not quite sure why he suddenly left his backpack on the bus or what class I'm supposed to be in. And I had them in my classrooms going, I don't know where I'm supposed to be. That brain pruning also can impact their organisation skills. So again, they might have been better at organising before this. So what we've got now is a boy starting to feel really not so good about himself. And of course, it's at the same point that the negative voice in our head starts getting stronger. So what they're doing is attacking themselves. So again, they kind of don't want to look up and look at us, because when we seem to be doing this stupid stuff, without realizing that not one of them has asked for this to happen, that not one of them quite often has realized that it's actually part of the preparation for his brain turning into an amazing adult brain. So when I was presenting, with large groups of boys, and I explained that, the epiphany, the look of light bulb moment going, well, why didn't someone tell me? So it is part of our job, and that's part of why I've written the book, is for us to sit with our boys and let them know there are going to be times you're going to be a bit more forgetful. So how about we work together at different ways that we can remind you that don't mean I have to nag at you or yell at you or get really frustrated with you, because they are frustrated with themselves. So communication. Now, can you see that? Can they wanting to pull away from us? Okay,
yes.
So the other things happening is in adolescence, we are trying to push our parents away and have more autonomy. So again, they kind of want you to step back a little, because I've got this, even though technically we know they haven't. But also they've heard so many times from when they were little boys, that tone in our parents' voice, particularly sometimes mummies, this, woo, why have you done that for? Like endlessly getting growled at for making poor choices, not because they're boys, not because they're bad, but because they made a poor choice. Yeah. So they've been shamed a lot. So by the time they get to adolescence, they're kind of just, they're just over it. And they think everything that's going to come out of our mouth is going to be about what we're doing wrong. So the keys, again, is the more connected and safe and loved they feel, and the more we fine-tune our techniques at connecting with our boys, then the more they're actually wanting to listen. The hunger that comes through from boys, from when I was counselling and teaching, they're really looking for someone who can listen to them and A, not interrupt, and B, really hear them. So they'll often give you a little bit, but they won't give you any more unless they can. So if you jump in with your story or you jump in telling him what you think, then he just stops the conversation. Another thing we know is that you keep using your terms of endearment for your son, especially when he probably doesn't deserve it. It makes it safer for him. So it doesn't trigger his amygdala to want to push us away.
Yeah.
Timing is huge again, because, especially us mummies, we have a thought and we want to talk about it straight away. They're not really good if they've got single focus. They're looking at their phone. They've just woken up. So timing's another one. And then the last one on that list is sometimes we know that movement helps open a boy's mouth. So going for a walk or going out and, kicking a soccer ball, throwing a basketball, listening to play some music with them, all of a sudden it kind of helps the big muscles get distracted and the mouth sometimes open. So again, it's a big chapter, that one, and I've already had some amazing responses with conversations that have started emerging from teenage boys in the car with just a few of the tweaks in how do we communicate a little differently than we do with girls.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is that, what you're saying is that as parents, we need to listen to understand rather than listen to respond. And I think that's a really important thing, because sometimes, we've got lots of stories, let's be honest, and we think we've got all the advice, but sometimes actually what they need most is actually just to be heard and just to be listened to.
Seriously, if you have sons, you are going to get frustrated some mornings when you get up and the full milk is sitting on the bench, left there all overnight because he forgot to put it back, or the empty one is in the fridge, or he has just lost another pair of boots. Of course we're going to be frustrated. Hello, we're all human. However, it's how we handle those, because we need to remember that he will be really attacking himself on the inside and frustrated with himself as well. And sometimes some compassion then can really help keep our relationship strong. So there's more likely that he'll come to us when he makes a poor choice. That's what we want. We want our boys to turn up and say, gosh, I've mucked up really badly. Come to their parents rather than feel too embarrassed or too ashamed to do that, because we all know they need to still lean on safe grown-ups.
Yes, that's exactly right. So I guess, Maggie, this is a bit of a long-winded question, so embrace me here. What's the hardest thing about raising tweens and teenagers, especially boys? And let us know what the difference is now than when it was before. And is there actually a science to doing it well? And you actually talk about in your book, I think it's page 290, you talk about the line in the sand. How does that relate?
Okay, so let's go back a couple of steps. One of the first things with that brain pruning that I've already talked about is that our tweens used to be able to see the world through a very similar lens to us. And then all of a sudden it's like a sledgehammer hits it. So that it kind of is like a cracked windscreen. So a mum may say to a son, just after the brain pruning, have you got your jumper? Now, if she said that beforehand, he might have gone, oh, yeah, I have. No, it's all right, mum. Whereas now, are you trying to criticize me? So what they actually interpret from some of our well-meaning stuff is actually not what we intended at all. So it can create unique challenges for them in that window. What was the second part of that question? I know the third.
No, that's right. Yeah, the second part of the question is there actually a science to doing it well? And then obviously the line in the sand is part of it. Yeah,
I think absolutely. If we can recognise that our tweens have always needed grown-ups to help monitor them and guide them. It's the how we monitor and guide them. So we're coming from a time where, for boys particularly, they were punished really severely because we thought they were tough. And so a lot of parents are still thinking our boys are tougher than girls, so we can be much more tough at them when they make poor choices. Yeah. We can also use that shaming language more. So again, we've got to really look at that, because what we know, shaming triggers the amygdala to want to fight us and push us away. So what we do sometimes is make it harder for them to love us or feel safe with us. Now, the line in the sand, one of the biggest challenges today is that we didn't have a digital world. Now, and I think it's probably, coming up to 15 years before the iPad turned up, and that was before the smartphone. So what we now know is our boy and our girls are accessing material that we really would prefer they didn't access until we've had a chance to have a mature, grown-up conversation about how appropriate it is. And, sometimes the parents say to me, when do I have the conversation about the birds and the bees? And I'll say, how old's your son? They go, 12. And I went, yep, I'm pretty sure he might know a fair bit more than you would think he knows. Now, what we need to know is that they are exposed to awful pornography and increased violence. Often unintentionally they stumble on it, so it's not always they're going to look for it. And what that does is it influences the mirror neurons in the brain. So they're now starting to see that some of that behavior might be what is normal in a sexually intimate relationship. We have got a massive job to be able to deconstruct all that material and let our boys. And I write in there particularly for the dads, you've got to have a conversation with your sons, many of them, about what great sex is and what porn sex is, because they're not, something in reality. How do we do that? How do we prepare them? Again, we hope the school does it, but that's just not going to be enough anymore. So we have to have, while they're looking at a world that's a bit nastier and more violent, they run the risk of being desensitized. That is a really big challenge for us. Okay, so then the last bit is the line in the sand. And this is where, and I'll touch on just one example here that I'm hearing from schools and I touch on in the book. And you remember I taught for 16 years, so I really was around our boys. And we know about 14 with that pruning. There's an awful lot of slapping and pushing and shoving of mates and sitting on them and trying to fart on them and call out inappropriate things, because it's not a good stage for the brain. And also that is actually what they do with boys they really like. So often physicality, they don't go and slap and grope and grab a boy's buttocks if they don't like him. So it's kind of a bit about friendships dynamic, weird stuff, we know. Yeah. But what we're now finding is they've watched pornography. They're now actually groping and flicking bra straps and trying to push girls in the school environment. And when they get pulled up for it, they're going, don't be stupid, I'm just trying to be funny. And it's hilarious. And that's where we now have to have really big conversations about a new line in the sand that says, no, that is not okay. And you know what? Some boys don't like it either. Yeah. So again, we're getting into that space of we have to have big chats with boys about kind of reading consent from boys and their banter and their silly behavior, as well as really appropriateness about consent with everything else. Because we now know that there are boys that really hate being flicked in the genitals in the change rooms, whereas it's being seen as normal Well, there is a place that says it's not normal for all of us, and we need to stand up and say, hey, yeah, I don't care if you do it with the others, but that's not okay with me. So we've got a lot of that sort of re-educating. I think that well-meaning parents, when we know how to communicate with them and they can create a sense of empathy with how that may feel, we've got a big job to reduce the violence and the lack of empathy in all of our kids because of the digital world.
Yeah, and so really the science behind it is actually trying to navigate what the world is throwing at the boys to try and transform them to become like what they want, rather than what you're trying to teach in the home. So what you're actually saying is that it's what is taught in the home as a parent to the boys, that's what we want them to own, rather than what the world and the technology and stuff is trying to push into them. And, after this interview at the end, because it's National Child Protection Week, we're going to show the body safety video, which is for young boys and young girls, to protect them from harm and abuse and understand their bodies. So I get what you're saying, Maggie.
And also, one of the things that I think is really challenging is that we were starting to head in a fabulous direction where we were pulling down the unhealthy patriarchy, the stuff and don't share any of your problems, you've got to be tough and all that. We're pulling it down, and we were heading in a fabulous direction where dads can be open-hearted and hands-on, and some are staying at home, and they're just, we're moving in such a great direction where men were able to hold those hearts open to the people they loved. And then kind of like this wave has kind of come along behind us, and now like it's this generation really of tweens, teens and young men up to 25 who we really have to step in now and support them, because we've created almost the opposite pull in the other direction. And we really don't know the things they've been exposed to. And I know there's a couple of disturbing, chapters in the book where research from some boys in America just saying that, the more you watch porn and the more violent movies you watch, the more violent and the more nasty it has to be to get the same sense of arousal. That's really what's happening when we keep conditioning our children to need rewards online, which of course a lot of boys, some girls, but a lot of our boys enjoy gaming, but we're conditioning them to get rewards, and levels of activity have to keep on going up in an adolescent brain that's still growing. And that's one of our, the other window that's really important in the science is that in the same window that your brain is pruning and you're making pretty poor choices and the GABA's turned off and you haven't got a prefrontal lobe, it's also the window where the brain makes an enormous amount of dendrites, which means you can learn really fast in the same window, which positively means you could dismantle a motorbike and put it back together, learn a new language. If you're improved in your sport or learn some music, you can learn really fast. But that also means you're most likely to become addicted faster. And it's a really vulnerable window that when we understand that, you can see why absolutely they need grown-ups to help monitor some of those unhealthy activities so that they don't develop an addiction that is difficult to unplug later.
Yeah, we'll get to that in the last question. But I wanted to ask you, so obviously we are recognising that it's a challenge at times to navigate boys in this space. And we're particularly talking about the P word, puberty. Now, how do we as parents navigate these changes that go on for them? How do we do that?
Okay. I think you just have to really be well informed. And at different times, I know that families that have spoken about it before it all happens are completely comfortable when, the boy runs out to show, mum and daddy's first pube. And we need to reassure them that kind of this is
so true. So true. So true.
That we want them to be comfortable about it. It's interesting that the bathroom door often stays shut for them, but it will still be open when mum and dad are in there. Like it's just this really comfort around. And I think they need to know also that sometimes the effect of puberty can create unique challenges, like the boys can sometimes lose their capacity to speak articulately during puberty, partly due to that brain pruning again. No, they didn't suddenly decide to become monosyllabic. That part of the brain got pruned off, and we might say to them, you need to open your mouth. Well, actually, it's not his mouth. It's his brain. So again, it's great. I want to make it as easy as possible for us to have little conversations about the sorts of things that are going to change and how all of us have gone through these sorts of things. We hope Dad doesn't tell too many bad stories too early. And one other really big one about the puberty, especially for mummies, is that the badly behaving penis is a reality. They don't ask it to stand up, and at times don't even know it's standing up. They have very little control over it. And I learned that in my classrooms before I had my sons, that we need to let them know this won't last forever, but there are awkward moments. We had so many of those messages, even from the teen boy survey, where how embarrassed they get when it decides to perform when they're actually doing something in a public space. So again, having those conversations and reassuring them it will settle down, but it can be a bit tricky, and that really not making it worse for another boy is another helpful thing in that journey of puberty. One other thing too that came up is how challenging it is for boys who get acne, and how much they absolutely want to avoid going out in public, don't want to speak in class, avoid taking on leadership roles in a school because they'll be seen. So you can imagine the pressure that's happened, over COVID-19 times, where they're stuck in front of a Zoom screen. Can you imagine just really tuning into how big that feels for them to be so exposed? And we also need to recognize in this window, the limbic brain grows, which means all girls and boys' teen emotions are way more intense. So you combine that together, if they know it's more intense, then we can cut them some slack when they slam those doors at us or give us a mouthful of, disrespectful language, or do something impulsive in the heat of the moment, because they don't have a prefrontal lobe that can pull them back from that moment. And gosh, don't we see some grown-ups who behave badly who do have prefrontal lobes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think there's something innate in boys, in men, that sometimes we just do dumb stuff, like just dumb stuff that we would say is dumb stuff. It's so funny when
sometimes the dumb stuff is to make mates laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Which makes me feel I belong. So there's actually a driver underneath it. They don't tend to want to, that's why that banter stuff, that teasing, it's more about connection, and they just don't always make good choices, do they? But that is actually connection.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's funny how you said, the show me your first pube and stuff. And I remember, in that situation, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. That's fantastic. I just got on board with him and just encouraged, because, he's growing up. This is a great thing. And obviously mum's like, oh my goodness. Anyway, there are different roles that a mother and a father play. Okay. And we know that we live in a world where mum and dad aren't always around. There are separation, and there is different types of families. But a mother has a role and a father has a role with their children and their boys. Can I ask, what is the different roles for those that they actually play? Because I know they play different. Can you give us a bit of an explanation?
Okay, so let's just put it out in the perfect world that we'd love it if everybody did have a loving, connected, switched on mum and dad that lived in the same house. Let's just put it out there.
Yeah, of course.
Follow mums can raise awesome sons. So it's not just as though. One of the key things that we need to keep, and this was really interesting from that survey of over 1,600 men, who was the most significant person who helped you over the bridge to manhood? And 56% said their mum. Yep. So what it showed us is that mums still matter. I know we're supposed to step back a little and we need to stop interrogating them. They need to have their own secrets. They need to be allowed to have a door shut. But they still kind of, whatever that mother figure, and sometimes it's not a biological mum, it's an auntie, or it's a kind of teacher, female teacher, who's kind of got that energy, which a little bit was like me. So we know that they're still yearning for someone who's going to help, who makes them feel safe on that mother spectrum. So for the dads, our dads are much more pragmatic, and often, that's the dad that says, oh, mum, relax, settle down, it's all okay, we've got this, But it's kind of like you can't download how to be a man from a woman. So if we have the solo mum or the dad that's away working a lot, then we have to really call our other men forward. Now, what the men have told me in the survey too was often they would find, they found it was a significant, grandparents are featuring in today's generation of young boys, which they didn't feature quite as much before. So how that's interesting. It's the men that are the good coaches and the music teachers, and sometimes a neighbour, but an uncle. So again, what boys need is the same as what girls need, is significant adults who become like lighthouse figures, who show them they care and who never give up on them. So really it's the one significant caring adult is the minimum. But for boys who have more than that, and I've just written a recent blog about the tribe. If you can form a tribe before your boys get on the bridge, then they often allow people that they've known before they've got on the bridge to be the voices that mum and dad get shut down for. So, we can sort of say, hey, mate, your hair's dripping with grease. You probably need to give it a wash, mate. He'd probably do it because I knew him when he was 5. But if mum goes, oh, you're always on at me. So you can see, again, it's a collective. It's a calling of the collective back. We cannot leave raising our boys over that bridge without the rails. We have to put them back. And it's not just looking after our own boys. It's looking after all boys, because all of us will benefit, because they will end up being healthier and stronger men, and healthier and happier, we're hoping.
So what you're saying is that a mum and a dad can provide the same but different. In other words, they provide the love that the child needs. They also provide that support, that provide that self-confidence, etc. But they also have different sets of rules or sets of input because they are differing people as well. And so I think that's an interesting statistic that you said, that high number of percentage actually said that their mum was actually helped them to become a man. That's a very interesting. I've never heard that before. No,
and that was really surprised when I got it. And I thought, no, that can't be right. And but the hunger for their dads, for the older men, was palpable. They were really hungry. I wish my dad had been around more. I wish my mum and dad had big conversations with me. So what's really beautiful is those men had said, this is what I do now as a dad. So that's pretty gorgeous, isn't it? The fact that I saw it, and I've looked back and I've reflected on it. But what I also found, and this is a really interesting thing, is that dads use less words and are more pragmatic about, they might just have a quick grunt and say, oh, mate, don't do that to your brother. Done. Right. That's it. And often that's that tone that dads can have sometimes. It just makes it right. Whereas if mum tried, it wouldn't work.
No.
So again, it's slightly different. So mum's likely to tackle the the lack of empathy they may have towards a sister, or if they've got into trouble for something at school, mum may decode what was going on in a more comprehensive way. And I do write about the power of the mum letter, because I had 2 rooster boys who were very feisty and strong and opinionated and all those wonderful things. And if I had a conversation with them that needed a bit of depth, I used to think they just forgot it too quickly. So I began writing a mum letter, and the mum letter just is, and I explain why it's important. They have to actually kind of read it 3 or 4 times to really get the deep message in there. That's about guidance. It's not about criticism. It's not. It just says, I love you, but man, this is something I want you to really look at, because I want you to look at this as an aspect of your character that at the moment is just needing a little bit of work. And once again, you don't have to write many of them, because you only write them about the big stuff. And you've got to spend days writing it so that it's actually got that loving tone, but at the same time, it's got the significant message in it. And again, I talk very much about the ability for dads to write those short messages. The most powerful one that I think you can write to your son, whether it's, you can send him a text nowadays, can't you? Is that that you're proud to be his dad. That seriously is pure gold to a boy. Even, if it's the week after they, broke the window because they were just mucking around and threw something accidentally, that's the thing that there's a palpable hunger from a boy is to hear that message. So again, write it on the mirrors, write it on a piece of paper, stick it in his lunchbox, or send him a text, or whatever you're communicating with nowadays. And that the hunger for them to know that we can love them while they can't love themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
So fundamentally important in terms of who we become as a growing up.
Yeah, wow. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. You know, one thing that I say to my son all the time, because he always says, you know, I want to make you proud, Dad. I want to do this, you know, and I think that's a really important thing. And he loves footy, right? So he loves the oval ball, AFL, not rugby, AFL, and he loves it and stuff. And he often comes to me and says, you know, how did I play and how to play? But before the game, I always say to him, you know, mate, I just want you to know that I'm proud of you because you're my son, not because of how well you play in the game. That's not what's going to make me happy. What's going to make me happy is you just go out there and do your best, and I'm privileged to be with Dad. That's it. And I think that's
huge.
It's important, right? So important.
It's a huge message, because the old man box says basically you need to be the winner, the one who's at the top, the most successful. And what that implies is that when you don't do that, then you're less than, and nobody can really love you as much. So it's a really big deconstruction that we have happening at the moment. And I think there's a slight rewording around, for me as a mum, is that instead of saying I'm proud of you, I'm proud for you.
Yeah, that's good.
That, you know, that was a slight shift that said I love you anyway, but I'm really proud for you, because I could see the look on the face. But again, we assume they know it. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you that they're way more fragile than we've been led to believe. And under that mask is an equally fragile teen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get into our Q&A, we've got a bunch of questions coming through, which I'm really excited by. And I just need to make it clear that, you know, we don't have all the time in the world to get to every single question, but we'll do our best. And obviously people can go to Maggie Dent's website, which will be up at the end of this time.
Yeah.
There has been a resurgence, I think, in the absolute need for a positive role model in our boys' lives. And I think there has been the word mentor, the word as another father figure, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's an absolute resurgence, and I think it's great for a couple of reasons. And one of those is that because when mum and dad might not, you know, be agreeing with you in your choices or whatever it is, and you take off, well, actually, it's really good to have someone that, you know, we trust and they trust, that we know that they're going to be safe, for one. But, I mean, what is a role model for boys, and what sort of characteristics would a parent be looking for to allow them to be a role model for their boys that aren't themselves?
That's an interesting question, because I reword it in terms of lighthouse figures, because significant adult allies is kind of like the role model. But I think sometimes, and I know I've spoken to men who've said, oh, look, I couldn't be one of those because I haven't got time to take on another boy, or, you know, I don't have time to be able to teach him all the stuff his own dad would, you know, and they kind of think it's a big, giant responsibility. But what boys will tell you, or they've told me, is that what I'm looking for is somebody that when I need to go and bounce off something, that I can be heard without judgment. But also if I need to have that loving, you know, kick in the bum, that I feel when they do it, they still love me and value me. It's a really, really important person. And we know that sometimes, as I said before, you know, we want the qualities, you know, but we don't always be the ones that choose it. So boys choose interesting. Every now and then, you know, and I was really surprised, you know, even my own experiences, when boys started to tell me they look at women as well, to look at attributes of their personality that they might like to copy. They don't just look at men. But so once again, you might not realize that sometimes it's a neighbor who the boy might have got to know a bit, who every now and then he just might hang on the fence and have a little chat with. He might only do that once every few months, but in the boy's mind, that is one of the people who shines a light on that invisible sign around his neck that says, make me feel I matter.
Yeah.
So again, you don't always have to do a lot. and that they are, oh my gosh, they can be easily led as well by because they're so desperate to be accepted and validated, as so many of our teens are. But what they're doing is they're constantly on the lookout for the people. And we do know that this particular culture that's partly online and everything, that celebrities and sporting heroes are role models. Some are fabulous.
Yeah.
But when we have the conversation again that says badly behaving ones are not role models, and they're not all able to be role models. However, we can learn from their misdemeanors. And I thought of that the other day with a couple of AFL footballers who went out to the nightclub, and I thought, how old are they? They're 22 and 23. So at the end of the day, their prefrontal cortex has not finished.
Yeah, that's right.
And they probably need someone within the club just to keep an eye that they didn't wander out, just because they're not as good at making decisions yet. Yeah. So again, I think that's really, really important for us to keep in mind, that you don't have to be involved in a great big huge way, but what are you modeling how to be a decent human being? Because that's what they're needing to see.
Absolutely. Well, we're about to get into our Q&A, and seriously, I feel like we could be here for another hour, let's be honest, but we've only got about 15, 20 minutes. So one of the questions that is starting to come through is, and we talked about that imperfect world where we don't have mum and dad always there. There's one particular theme that's coming through, is how do single mums actually take on the role, the father role, when either the father is not perfect, no one is, but but also the father is absent.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought I sort of touched on it a little bit, that we know that boys are already looking. They're already looking for males outside of that if their dad's not around. One of the things that solo mums, and I was a solo mum for 12 months, is I did have big conversations with my sons around the home environment, saying that I actually needed them to step up and help me out as a parent in terms of getting things done. So I actually really made sure they knew that I wasn't going to be a slave, but that I wanted them to develop some life skills that they could take forward later in life. But I also found in my conversations, like, say I didn't have boys that were into music, I had boys that were more into surfing and sport, that and when I found there was a subject they enjoyed at school, or a teacher that really, really cared about them, particularly a male one, when I wanted them to get a bit of a kick in the butt because they weren't finishing their homework or assessments, I had a quiet chat to that teacher, who would have a quiet chat to the boy. So in actual fact, they were acting as a male figure. I don't know that we have to put father in front of it. They're just looking for good, healthy males who care about them. Again, they have a hunger definitely for their real dad, provided he hasn't been abusive and, responsible for causing all sorts of pain. And what we tend to find is they're making up their own mind as they, venture over the bridge. So there are some around. If you haven't got them in your family, then have a chat to one of your girlfriends, husbands, and give them a nudge, because sometimes they just need a nudge and they will step up. But they just didn't think of it at the time, and they didn't think that they could do that for you. So again, sometimes we have to give good men a little bit of a nudge. Can they occasionally, just do something that might give them a sense of belonging in their own gender space?
Yeah, that's really good. What about sibling rivalry? We're getting a lot of questions around sibling rivalry. How do parents navigate that? Because I mean, you've got brothers and brothers that kind of hang out and it's really cool and stuff. But I know with my brothers, I literally wasn't really friends with them until I was an adult, and that's how we connected, through drinking and enjoying that kind of thing a long time ago. But how do they navigate that? Do parents need to step in, or do they kind of put in the boxing gloves?
All right, so there's a difference. If you have a house full of boys, you'll know there's an awful lot of wrestling. Wrestling, jumping on top of each other, shoving each other, competing against each other. And I need to reassure you that 90% of that is absolutely healthy and normal, because it's what we call aggression nurturance. Once again, boys use physicality to have fun, and they really want to have fun. And every now and then, of course, it does hurt. And if we can step back a bit, so my challenge, I keep on talking about having 3 rules on your fridge if you've just got boys. Yeah. And that is that try not to hurt yourself, try not to hurt anyone else, and try not to damage the world around you. So if they do jump on their brother from the top bunk, I can tell you that there's absolutely no intention to hurt their brother that's at the bottom. However, that is one of those rules that have been broken. So once again, we have a conversation that says that's a bit high, and that's the line in the sand. That is not okay. So don't do that one again. And one of the things that comes up in the research is if you create opportunities for significant fun play mainly with your siblings, and it's girls and boys as well. So taking them and doing seriously good fun stuff on weekends and things actually builds a hidden bond that means they'll tend to get on better in their 20s, which is really interesting. And I watched that with mine. Okay, so girls and boys again. If you do have a brother who's, once again, giving the girl what he thinks, remember, he's doing it because that's how he shows he loves you. There will be the same conversations at times that is too hard. But what we do know from siblings is that if you have a brother, you are going to be way better at working with men later in life. Yep. You are probably going to be a bit stronger around getting bumped or knocked when you play sport. So there are some really hidden advantages to it. And I think it's that conversation. If you're worried about a physicality that's got too physical, it needs to come to a parent meeting around, you have a family meeting. Make sure you feed them if you've got boys first. And then have that conversation about, so we've got a bit of a challenge here in the family and we need to solve it together. And that is, look, Sally's just saying that now you 2 boys gang up her and jump on her, and you've actually hurt her a couple of times and she said stop and you haven't. So that's when we talk about the need to have a very clear symbol, which is exactly what we teach in all our protective behaviours, that says stop, no, stop. Yeah. And when that happens, you do need to stop. And I think it's one of those things you can't, you set in the boundaries in place because, that's where it happens. And they will forget in the heat of the moment when they're having so much fun. They will forget, but we keep bringing it back to, did you use the stop signal? You must look at the stop signal, which is also linked to consent. Yeah. So again, at the end of the day, I love it that if you have an older sister, she's often going to be really helpful at decoding girls for boys a bit later. So, that's not okay. Don't say that.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that to have that mixed family there, that's actually going to be okay in the long run. I'm glad that, because I've got the same situation. That's right, many siblings. That's right. Now, another question that we had coming through is what do parents do with those teenagers who are trying to negotiate a longer curfew so they can go out later and party and things like that? I mean, how do you give and take in that so that you can keep them safe, but also they can have the freedom to learn and grow?
Yeah, and that is their biological wiring. So again, remembering that the most critical window that our boys can make really appalling poor choices and get into the sorts of things that are really dangerous is before 16. So keep the doors shut as much as possible till 16 if you can, or the year they turn 16. So that's around year 11. So when it is time and there is a party, then you have to determine what feels right with your family values. And I was really strict that was it. You weren't really allowed to party till then. Of course, they did sneak out to a couple, which I did find out about. But you know what? That's kind of the stretching and taking risks and getting to do things without your parent. But most of the time it was no. So again, we need to know the conversation is if you're going to a party, instead of lecturing them, like, don't do drugs, don't do alcohol, don't do this, what we do is we say, okay, so you're going to go into a situation where there is likely to be these things, even though you are not taking it. And I'd prefer you not to drink it because your developing brain isn't good with it. Mm-hmm. So tell me what you would do if all of a sudden where this party is, a whole bunch of much older gate crashers who are inebriated decide to join the party. What are you going to do? And, what do you think your friends will need you to do? Like step them into real life situations. Secondly, is what happens if one of your friends collapses on the floor and you know he's not asleep. So it could be an alcoholic coma, and we would have a conversation about what that looks like. So that, you be a guardian. What would you do in that situation? Do you know to put them in a recovery position and call an ambulance straight away? What happens if you are concerned that somebody's had an accident and there's blood, but there is no access to, the phones don't work? What are you going to do then? So what you do is you absolutely problem solve and then listen to their responses, because I can tell you quite often they've got a pretty good grip on that stuff, but you may need to add 1 or 2 points. And it's those 1 or 2 points they'll take on board because they've already heard, you've listened to what those others. So what if is a really important strategy. And the other thing is also reminding them that the most dangerous time from parties particularly is coming home. So again, have really clear strategies around that. So I was the mum that said, look, you won't probably be able to find a taxi. That was before Ubers, of course, and you might not get one of those either. Just call me and I'll come pick you up. No questions asked, just I'll pick you up. And even when they were 21 and 22 at, New Year's Eve parties, there's never enough, means of getting home. We don't want them in cars with anyone who's been drinking. I much prefer they could just pick me up. Not if they vomited in the car, they have to clean it out later the next day.
Of course. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, our job is to get them home safely. And I think if we step up and be the parent that helps them do that and their friends, then we are being a responsible, loving parent that is also, again, letting them have those freedoms, but with boundaries around the freedoms.
Yeah, wow. I mean, there are so many questions coming through. We just don't have time to. But I've got one last one that is incredibly topical and probably the most important that we've talked about so far. And that is that you would have seen that there has been, hopefully you haven't seen it, but there has been probably one of the most topical things is TikTok. Now, we have actually addressed that on a Facebook Live here and how bad that app is. But unfortunately, on YouTube, Reddit, a number of other different platforms, TikTok, Instagram, unfortunately, someone has suicided and they have streamed it live. Unfortunately, some parents have got kids that are younger than even 13 or even just older that have watched it. A really important question that I want to address today just quickly is how do parents actually navigate that conversation?
Isn't it really sad? And look at all the spamming that you've had for this event, which was for all the best interest to support families. This is the dark side of the internet. So when we see something that is really confronting for all of us, it traumatizes us, no question. And one of those things, I think it is sad because some of these children, again, are really young, even the older ones. And I know I've heard today that there was a boy who got to, one of his friends showed it to him at school. And when he got home, he told his mum he'd seen this really sick things, but he'd actually deleted TikTok because he said he doesn't want to watch any of that sort of crap anymore. Yeah. So again, there may be a side to this that makes them a little more wary of it. Okay, so if you have a child in that position, I know this is going to sound a little bit weird, but what we want them to do is to actually talk to you if possible. If you can hold their head, I know this sounds weird, hand across here and hand across the back and lay them on your lap. And I know it's an acupressure point that helps to release tension in the body and actually get them to just tell you that, how they're feeling in their body and what's happening for them. And then after that, I would like them to be able to, whatever that image is, imagine you can put it as a photograph. And then imagine that, mum or dad, whoever's not holding the head, can take the photograph and just keep walking further and further and further and further away till the photograph becomes a tiny dot. Because what we have to do is try and shift the image that keeps triggering them to be harder for the brain to find. Yeah. And then at the same time, the K27, but also underneath the eye is where we have fear. And the K27, keep tapping on the feeling so we release the emotion out of the body so we can reduce it. So again, and then the next thing you do is you have them draw beautiful pictures with some, unicorns and rainbows if they're girls, or whatever it is for a boy. So we actually try and replace an image over the top of that. So again, there are strategies that we can use, but at the end of the day, immerse your children in the next 2 weeks with the most beautiful images from their childhood, get back to reading picture books that were beautiful and special when they were younger, and you'll gradually reset the nervous system out of the trauma.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Maggie, what you've shared has been such a blessing, and you know, I'm sure there's so many parents that have just been so encouraged. I'm as a parent, I just want to have you on speed dial, to be honest with you. There's other people that are giving so much love to you on this. So if you get a chance, go back and have a look. And we just want to say a massive thank you. We have got a few things that we're going to be doing when you leave. We want the parents to stick around, really important. But right now, we're just going to put up the links to where you need to go, and also to go to childsafe.org.au/live and make sure you enter the competition to win one of these incredible books that is absolutely amazing. I've got it on audio. I've got it on physical. It's become a bit of a new Bible, a parenting Bible for me. So I'm very thankful. And so, yeah, you can win that competition, and we'll be drawing that tonight. And the other links will come up as well. MaggieDent.com, panmcmillan.com.au. You can go to Instagram at Maggie Dent Author, or the Facebook as well. Maggie, thank you so much.
Remember, so much information is completely free on my website. So if you haven't got the money, then it's in there under the adolescent book, under the videos, on the YouTube channel, because I'm really committed about getting common sense information into parents as easily and as digestible as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Maggie. We are so blessed and encouraged. We hope you have an amazing day, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
No worries. All right, so that was Maggie Dent and our interview. We are so blessed and encouraged. Hopefully you were. Do some clapping emojis or something like that to thank her. That'd be great. Remember to go to childsafe.org.au/live, go into the competition, and also our Facebook page, our Facebook group, which is Child Safe Australia-for Parents. It's a specific Facebook group we've set up to encourage parents. Now, I want to let you know some really, really cool stuff. Our next webinar, which is going to be on October 14th, we have the incredible Dr. We've got Dr. Coulson, which is Justin Coulson, who is absolutely incredible, and he's going to be talking about big feelings and happy families on October 14th with Dr. Justin Coulson, which is absolutely fantastic. So stay tuned at our Facebook page for that link. Now, this week is National Child Protection Week, and we have launched our very own body safety video based on the incredible material from Janine Sanders from E2E Publishing, which is the sponsor even for this particular live, which has been fantastic. And we're just going to play this video now that you can share off our Facebook. Thanks, guys.
Hi, I'm Link. This is my pencil case, and this is my ruler. This is my body, and it belongs to me. You know what? I can say no if I don't want a kiss or a hug. I can just give them an elbow bump instead. I'm okay with that. My body, I'm the boss, and I say what goes. There's a group of adults I trust. I can tell these people anything, and they'll believe me. They are like my own personal superheroes. They are my safety network. If I feel worried, scared, or unsure, I can tell my safety network how I am feeling this way. If I feel frightened or unsafe, I may sweat a lot, get a sick tummy, become shaky, my heart might beat fast. These feelings are called early warning signs. If I feel this way about anything, I must tell my safety network straight away. My private parts are under my shirt, my shorts, and even my mouth is a private part. I always call my private parts by their correct name. No one can touch my private parts, ask me to touch their private parts, or show me their private parts. If any of these things happen, I must tell my trusted adult on my safety network. I should never keep a secret that makes me feel bad or uncomfortable. If someone asks me to keep a secret that makes me feel bad or unsafe, I must tell an adult on my safety network straight away. It's our body, our rules. Your body, it belongs to you.
Well, thank you so much for coming along to this Facebook Live. We are so appreciative. And again, we're so sorry about all these spamming comments. We don't have any ability to stop that. But we also want you to know that we really appreciate you making this time. We think you are absolutely incredible as parents, and we are so grateful that we get to be part of your journey. Until October 14th, we look forward to seeing you again. Have a wonderful evening and take care.